Welcome to Positive Philter with your host, Philip Wilkerson, a podcast that focuses on friends, family, health, and career, with a little self-help along the way. Please join me in this journey for self-improvement, and I hope what I have to share will make you a better person, thus making the world a better place. I hope you enjoy the show. I hope you enjoy the show. Hello, people of the world. It's Philip Wilkerson back with another episode of Positive Philter. I'm joined by a special guest. Everyone's a special guest because they take their time to join me on my podcast here. I'm joined by a fellow podcaster, author, just higher ed professional or ex-professional. I don't know what he wants to call himself, but I'm joined by someone that is really doing remarkable work in sharing the benefits of going to college, especially with new students and all those things that we connected on LinkedIn. I listened to his podcast, which is great. But Elliot, before we get into this conversation, give the listeners a little bit of background on who you are.
Well, it's great to be here, Philip. And I'm someone who's passionate about and really on a mission to help students succeed. And so I've been a consultant to more than 100 colleges and universities, helping them improve their student experience by transforming their facilities, their technology, their support services. And then I'm also the author of How to Get the Most Out of College, where I take what I've learned about how students succeed and about how college works and share it with students and families so they can make it work for them.
I love it. I mean, go back to the origin story. I like, superheroes and all that. What made you think about curating this content or even making it into a book?
Well, I guess two formative experiences for me. In so many people's lives, they had an inspiring teacher, and we hear so many stories about how somebody did something outside of the classroom that was just as impactful in them finding their career path. And those two things ring true for me. One is I had an amazing art teacher, Mr. Baida. He taught art like it was a college architecture class. So we did these amazing projects like sixth grade, bring in a game board, analyze the underlying structure, and then three-dimensionalize it. That was amazing. So that made me want to be an architect. And I went to school as an architect, and I got a great education in creative thinking and problem solving and communications, and worked for a while as an architect, but realized I wanted to better understand people and have a greater impact by not exactly solving the problem, but figuring out what the problem was by talking to people, looking at the data, surveying folks. And then the other thing that happened to me as part of that pivot from architecture to design thinking and strategy around student experience was getting involved in student government when I was in grad school at MIT, which was a great place, but was in transition. And the student government came together, and we did a survey and town hall meetings and focus groups. And from those, we sort of figured out what were the pain points for students. How do we compare to other departments? And we went to the new dean with lots of ideas, and she pretty much wanted to do them all. And it was such an informative and formative experience for me, because that's a lot of what I do every day, that kind of consulting, talking to students, talking to faculty, talking to leadership to figure out what's working, what isn't, how to fix it, and how to help students succeed. And in those student government meetings, I met my wife. So that's pretty important too.
Awesome. I love that. I love those stories and the relationship building. So you brought up a really good point, about, bringing up ideas and getting involved as a student, and you got involved as a student. But one of the things I have a question about, and I've heard, and I know you're very familiar with this, is the hidden curriculum. I think this kind of aligns with your book, right? Like there's a cultural nuance for first gen students or just new students to college period, that the inner workings of the educational space or higher ed is not obviously known to everyone. It's hidden. So can you talk about that notion and how that kind of plays a part into your book that you created, like things that you break down for students that somewhat are not as obvious as some people think it is?
Yeah, and that's a problem. That the problem of the hidden curriculum, where colleges and universities aren't explicit about what they mean or how to succeed, that's a problem that also needs to be kind of worked from both perspectives, right? Colleges and universities, they can really think about terminology and make things more accessible, right? There's no need to call things uh, a bursar when you can say student financial services, because like no one knows what a bursar is, right? So call things what they are. And I tell students who are applying to college, searching for college, that those are great indicators, of like how focused on you is this college going to be. If they call everything stuff that you don't know, like that's a pretty good indicator, right? So I think colleges can be thinking about the students, they can be meeting students where they are, they can be communicating in language they understand, they can be working hard in orientation and welcome week and all these other activities to help make the implicit explicit, and talk to students about what they expect and how to succeed. And then I think students, you can do your part um, at learning that hidden curriculum, by asking questions and by finding a person. It doesn't need to be you. You don't need to know everyone, and in fact, a university can't expect you to know everyone. But like maybe you're a transfer student, so there's somebody in the transfer student office that you can go to and say, what does this mean? Or maybe you're a first gen student and there's someone at the first gen center you can go to and you can say, what are office hours? So I don't think you're still going to have to ask some questions. You're still going to have to take some risks, but I think there are definitely people that can demystify, that can debunk, that can make things more explicit and can explain. And the great thing about college is like pretty much everybody's there to help you. They may not know that you need help. They may not know that nobody knows what a bursar is. They may not know that nobody, lots of folks don't understand, like, why is R Thursday? Like,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
where did that come from? So I think, I think we're all working on it, and students can ask questions, and, and universities can make things more clear.
I love that. I love that. I mean, you're saying you're consulting. You're seeing universities all over the nation. From my end, there was a lot of things going on, great resignation, people leaving, but then there's also a lot of things on the student end. From your observation, from your research, from your data, what are some of the pressing issues in higher ed that you've noticed that are, major issues that professionals that work in that environment should know or be aware of, or parents sending their kids to college should be aware of? What is some pressing issues in the industry of higher ed?
Well, I think two things come to mind: growth and value. And the growth piece is really interesting because every year my company does a national student experience survey to kind of take the pulse of students on how they're feeling, what's working, what isn't, what's missing in their college experience. And in this year's survey, which we did last fall and it came out in the spring, the really interesting thing was that when we asked students about their sense of whether or not they were growing, and we talked about growing as like building skills, building a network, like exploring a career path, taking risks, building confidence, that one question had the highest correlation with so many other aspects of their experience. So basically, if students feel like they're growing, then they're happy. They're more likely to recommend their school. They're happy with their classes. They're happy with their friends. They're happy with their career. And so it's really like thinking about college as this opportunity to grow and giving students the opportunity to grow. And I think reflect, because a lot of times we don't realize we're growing until we get a chance to think about it and reflect on, maybe we did take a risk, maybe we did learn something new, maybe we did meet a new person. So I think that's something that really colleges and universities can work on, thinking about how they really maximize the opportunities for growth and for students to like recognize and realize those opportunities. And then I think the other thing is the rising cost of college and the increased complexity of college, as well as like political polarization, I think have had a lot of folks questioning the value of higher ed. And there's study after study, and there was just a big article in the New York Times about by Paul Tuff about like perceptions of value, and I think that's the big question on many people's mind, is that, you know, the cost has gone up 2 or 3 times in some ways. You know, the actual price that people pay in some ways is going down because of discounting and so forth. But I think people feel like the price is increasing at a faster pace than the value.
Yeah.
And so they're really hungry for ROI and value.
Yes. Yeah.
And I'm really excited that like my book is you know, I'm glad to be part of the solution, not part of the problem, because I think there's a lot of evidence about things you can do in college to get more out of it, like finding a mentor, like doing projects in your classes that help, you know, companies or groups in the community, real world projects, like doing internships, like playing a leadership role. These things all have proven payback. You know, and there's lots of things institutions can do about helping you graduate on time, or like I'm a big fan, like Purdue University has had this degree in 3 accelerated program, so you can graduate, you know, a year early, and things like that I think are really great.
I like it. I mean, I'm just curious, you know, the intersection, you know, mental health is going up, you know, mental health issues with students. And when you said grow, do they like really want to be like, you know, just this, there's professional growth and personal growth. And so when they're thinking about students saying, I want to grow, are they kind of saying both sectors? Like, I want to grow as a person and be more confident and strong and all that. That's a, you know, personal growth thing, but also professionally. Like, I want to you know, be more ready for, you know, the world of work. Are they seeing that in that sense? Or is that just me adding an adult lens on what I think growth looks like?
I think, I mean, the questions we ask about growth get at both aspects, and it seems like those two things are overlapping to an increasing degree. You know, people, you know, while people have, you know, may want work-life balance and may not see their career as their, you know, sole source of fulfillment, growing personally and professionally has a significant amount of overlap, right? Like, I know this is your area of expertise, but right, like networking and making friends and building relationships with with peers and faculty, like that translates pretty readily to networking and making connections with future employers and coworkers. So I think a lot of the skills and activities help you grow personally and professionally.
Yeah, I think that's great. And then, you know, my next question is, you know, like ROI. You spoke about value.
Right.
This is the big $1 million question. Is college still necessary? Like, you know, like we talk about, you know, going to trade school and all that, but like if you had to stand on it, like sell a parent, you know, sending their kid off, or just that person that's returning to the world of work as a career switcher or a veteran, like, is college the actual process of going to a higher ed institution? Is it still valuable or worth it or necessary for advancement?
Well, you know what I love about the Paul Tuff New York Times article is they give a new metaphor for thinking about college. And the idea is college used to be like a guaranteed return. You know, it used to be like a government bond.
Yep.
And now it's like going to the casino. Um,
Yeah.
and so for some students, it's not going to have a return. But for most students, it will. And I think there are three factors there. I think there's a where, there's a what, and there's a who.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we're very focused as a society on where to go.
Mm-hmm.
Until recently, there was pretty big consensus that where you go actually didn't matter so much. Like there was an article 25 years or so ago called "Estimating the Payoff," and it basically looked at people who got into elite universities and went to others, and on average it had really no impact. Recently there was a study by the Opportunity Insights folks at Harvard that actually confirmed that on average bit, and said on average it actually doesn't really matter where you go, but when you look at the distribution, going to an elite, a selective institution makes you much more likely to be in the 1%, and going to an elite institution is in a way an advantage for the 1% or the 0.1%. So I think where you go certainly matters to some extent, but not as much as people think. Then the what is what you do when you're there,
Mm-hmm.
and that matters a ton.
Yes.
Because two different majors at the same school can have very different ROI, different activities. Like doing a co-op. Like if your school is a co-op school where you intersperse work and school, students who do a co-op, on average, they earn 10 grand higher in starting salary. Or students who get involved in service learning, where they're doing like projects in the community as part of their classes or alongside their classes, that's also almost a 10K salary bump. Students who play a leadership role, that's a 7% salary bump. So students who have a mentor, they're almost twice as likely to be engaged at work, to like their job, after graduation, almost twice as likely to think their education was worth the cost. So the what matters a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately, there are still like systemic barriers to success. So the who does matter. And there are amazing institutions like Georgia State where there's parity by race and income, but at a lot of other places, those race and income are still predictors of college success. So I think I think you got to think about the where, the what, and the who, and the what is the thing that students and families have the most control over.
Most agency.
So I think focus there.
I love that. I love that you say that, because I always talk about, like, you always joke. I always used to joke with students, like, I don't care if you went to Harvard or George Mason. If you went to Harvard and barely had like a C student, and you went to George Mason, was a student leader, involved in everything, you just as competent. You know what I'm saying? Like, you look just as good on a resume. I mean, you can go to these elite Ivy League schools but not be involved, and go to a smaller school or state school and be Mr. and Mrs. everything that stands out. You're setting yourself up for success. But also systemically, there's barriers in the brand, like, which is weird. I think it's lowering now. Like, the allure of Ivy Leagues is not as strong in this generation as it used to be. I think it is.
And I think absolutely. And I think there are also like more inclusive hiring practices that employers are starting to put in place, where, for instance, like names and institution names get redacted on the resume, right? So at least when you do that initial screening of candidates, you're looking at people on the merits, not by, and you're trying to remove, unconscious or implicit or even explicit, fortunately, bias about their name or their pedigree.
I love it. I mean, and I love the fact, I love when people give agency to people, like you said, like there's uh in regards, I'm one that believes that there's systemic barriers, that not everyone has equitable treatment, but then, still on a glass half full type of person, regardless of the world and systems around me. I think there's also a sense of agency that I still have control. I still can control what's between my ears. So maybe going back to that, regardless of race, gender, really systemic issues and barriers that affect all people, what would be some ways to take power? Like if you were talking to a freshman, what would you tell that freshman or transfer student, someone that's new to an environment, freshman or transfer student, what would be some of your first, like week one things that you would encourage that transfer student or freshman student to do,
Well, one of my favorite parts of writing How to Get the Most Out of College was talking to lots of people who know more than me. And one of the people I talked to is the director of the National Center for the First Year Experience at University of South Carolina. And Jennifer had this great suggestion, which is kind of build a 3-tiered network. And I love this because the first tier are your peers. Those are people that you have some shared experience with. You're going through something together. You realize you're not alone. They're new too. They're adjusting too. Imposter syndrome is kicking in for them too. And you get support from connecting with them. And then the next tier up is your like peer advisor network. So those are people that are maybe only one step removed from you. They're not first years, they're second or third or fourth years or grad students. Maybe they're, your RA, your resident advisor. Maybe your school has a peer mentoring program or a peer advisor program, or maybe they're like the more senior folks in a student organization you get involved in. Mm-hmm. So those folks know stuff that you don't, and one of my favorite stories in my book was an international student who, initially all our friends were just international students. And then she realized like, oh, we all have the same problem. Like nobody has a solution. So she started playing a club sport.
Yeah.
And then she met all kinds of people, older than her, different backgrounds, non-international students, and they had things to, they had some answers to, the questions that she had, and she had some answers to questions they had, and so forth. So you want the next layer up to be people that know different stuff, have had more experience, whatever, and then the third tier is your expert network, which could be your professors, could be, the person who runs the transfer student center, the multicultural center, the first gen center, the student veteran center, the student parent center, whatever, might be an affinity group, it might be the faculty member in your, living learning community residence hall. But I think like finding your people is really the first step. And, think about it in those 3 tiers, and know that like sometimes you got to find your places to find your people. And, it might be going to the Pride Center. It might be going to the Student Veteran Center. It might be going to the library. It might be going to an event. And I think once you find your people and places, like, then you can start to find your program. Lots of places you got to pick engineering or business or whatever, before you enter. But so you may already have your program, but there's a nice kind of progression there. You go from people to places to program to path.
I love that. I think informally, I'm trying to think of myself, what I did when I transferred. I transferred to JMU from Bowie State. And I'm like, all right, who are my peers? I went through that, like, who are my roommates when I transferred? They're going to be my people that are already there earlier than me. And I just went to all the activities they went to, and they brought me in because, like, they were already there 2 years ahead of me. So I'm like, they'll be my people. And then I could literally go through that list. And it's funny because I didn't think about it as systemically as that, but it's just naturally, like what you do. But
Yeah,
how would
can
you
be
how would you
organic.
make that a very natural progression? Like maybe, I don't know, people are naturally doing this all along. They just never thought of it as this is a really good strategy, and we talked about this on, your podcast about like what ways can a freshman or transfer student really do that is not as intimidating as they think, because I think we're telling you connect and find your people, but what if, they're that's scary. I guess they're like, I don't know how to find people. I don't know, what ways would you, not say dumb it down, but normalize that, also really scale it down for them to find their people, because I think that's great.
Well, I think two things. I think get involved in some way, and that could be a club, a student organization, could be student government, could also be a campus job. I mean, my own experience, I grew up with really severe food allergies. Um, so when I got to college, I was really sweating. Like, how's it going to work in the dining hall? I don't want to eat. I don't want to eat the wrong thing and die. I also needed money, so my campus job was to work in the dining hall, and it worked out great because, like, A, I got money for food, but B, I also met all the chefs, all the cooks, and like they totally took care of me, and they knew my food allergies, like, back and forth, and they would make me something special to me, but probably boring, boring boring for somebody else, plain piece of chicken breast, whatever it might be. So I think get involved, and it doesn't have to be extra time. It can be your job. It can be a class project. Um, and I think show up to that group um, looking to give more than you can take. And I think, like, if you show up to a student organization or a job or whatever it might be, and say, like, this is what I have to offer, this is what I can contribute, um, you'll get back uh, that same contribution, and then some. Um, and I think the reason networking and involvement goes wrong sometimes is, like, people go in with this, sort of like, what's in it for me
Mhm.
mindset. And even I get that you have pressing needs and you're looking for help, but it's interesting that, like, the way you find that help is often by helping others.
Yeah, I love it. I always thought about that too. It's like, in regards to agency and power, is that like especially empowering students that like in a networking space, like don't think that you don't bring anything to the table too. Like I've told a lot of my mentees, like you bring skills, you bring insights, sit in that too and say like, is there anything I can do to help you when you're like reaching
Right.
out to help? And you never know, like you be like, hey, I need you to like show me how to use, TikTok. I'm just saying like, you know how to use this,
Yep.
or like you're already involved in a group. Can you, make sure that when I send you emails that you share it with your classmates? So like I always I love that story. Like always go at it with the sense of agency that you also bring value. And I know it's a lot of hierarchy and mentorship up, but also think like you bring value up too. Like I've
I'm
learned
sure.
tremendously from young people and students. And so understand that too. Like it's not just give me, give me, give me. Like you bring value, and you can contribute and give as well. I love that. Um,
Absolutely.
yeah, think about that. Yeah, can you like using that scenario? What do you think in that whole scenario with the food allergies? If you've reversed it, what value were you bringing to the staff? Because I know you did, but I could connect that
I
piece.
think the I think the big thing I was bringing was I was actually, like, being an advocate for other
Mhm.
students, with allergies, or who had needs, because I was bringing awareness, um, and I was also, like, making it more concrete, because sometimes you're thinking about students in the abstract, right? Like, oh, these students have special dietary needs or whatever it is, but, like, I was a face to
Mhm.
that need, and and they would ask me questions, and it's funny. Like, I ran into one Steve. His name, yeah, Steve. I ran into one like years later when I went back to UVA. Like he had moved on, and then he was like a chef in a hotel. And like you know, like it was a memorable experience.
Yeah, and I think about that too. Like, don't students out there stay in touch. You get those random emails from 10 years ago. You don't know how much that juices up a faculty member that they remember, or like
Oh
dang,
yeah,
I impacted that student's life unbeknownst to me. I thought I was just making sure that Elliot had good food to eat, but that also was like behind the scenes. That was making sure that you were safe on campus, and that made an impact. So some people, I don't
yeah,
think some people realize the impact they have on both ends.
yeah. The other thing that occurs to me, I don't want to make this about me, but I will say like the one other lesson about like finding your people and getting involved is like don't be afraid to a lot of times people are afraid to join a group, but they're also afraid to leave a group. You
Mm,
know, you don't want to let go of one thing before you can hold on to the next thing. I joined a club sport my first year, and it was just not it was not my scene. And like the people playing, we'd go on road trips, and the people were just like, drinking too much and like vandalism, and I was like, this is not my thing. So I left, and found another club team that was very much a better fit. So I feel like lowering the stigma of like trying out a group, and if it doesn't feel good, move on. And like what one of the things I talk about in the book is like it's not about fitting in, it's about finding acceptance.
I
Right?
love it.
People have this like mindset of like I need to fit in, but that like you don't want to change who you are, right? You want to find a group that accepts who you are. And if you feel yourself like
Conforming. Yeah.
conforming, like that's maybe a sign. I mean, some of that changing could be growing, right? Could be a good thing, could be figuring out who you are and what you value and who you want to be and who you want to be with. But sometimes that conforming is a red flag, because
Yeah, I love
it
that. I love
means
both
you can't be
ends.
yourself.
Yeah, I love both ends where it's like process by osmosis. Like maybe you conform to something that makes you raise yourself or be better. Like you join a group of people that are like really ambitious and driven, and it helps you elevate yourself. But then also, like you said, I love that values check. Like, but maybe some places are not worth conforming if it sacrifices your values. So I think maybe as a student, understanding who you are first before you try to go to spaces, so that you know that those spaces are for you, a good fit for you.
Yeah.
I love it. So, futuristic hat. I love that you're my data man. You're where do you think the world of education, higher education is headed with the data you collected, the schools you talked to, the points that you bring in the book? Like, do you think that the landscape, like, do you think you would have to write a whole new version of your book in 2 years, or it's timely enough that this book can carry out for 10 years? Like, what do you think about the future of higher ed and its applicability to, for your book and stuff? If you have to, like, it's changing that fast or whatever.
Well, I think it comes down to supply and demand. And right now, there's more supply than there is demand, unless something changes.
Mhm.
Meaning, there are more seats at colleges than there are students. That's why colleges are closing, especially small ones, faith-based institutions. There used to be plenty of students, um, and so you could recruit regionally. Now there aren't, so you have to recruit nationally. Now all of a sudden, and if you don't have a national brand, now you got competitors that you didn't have before, and students have to find you, and you have to find them. And so I think um, I think one big shift is that um, we have one way of looking at it is we have too many colleges. Um, because there aren't enough students and there are going to be fewer, there's the demographic cliff coming with fewer students. But I'm an optimist, and I'm bullish on the future of higher ed, because I think another way of thinking about it is, if we really focus on value and we really help students get more out of their college experience and really focus on student success, increasing accessibility, graduation rates, effectiveness, impact, return on investment, there's actually plenty of students out there, because right now only 63% of high school grads go to college. 5 years ago, that was 69%. And it's a pretty big drop, right? So if we move the needle on that, that's just there's so many more students out there. And there's also 39 million Americans with some college and no degree, right? If some of them, a good portion of them, could go back to school in the right circumstances, right? If it was a value. So I think students can find the value if universities really focus on that, and they retool their programs and their support services around that idea, without just kind of like assuming that there'll be demand and assuming that there always be relevant. And I think some things are, but other things really need to change.
Yeah, I think about that too. You just brought up a good point. Like a lot of these universities are doing, like, if you had a lot of credits already that will work with you and you can complete your degree, or like these very non-traditional programs. I think one of was like down in Morehouse, they're doing like something where it's like, just finish your degree. We'll help you finish it, for people that got really close and life circumstance happened. So I think I was talking to someone the other day, I think there's going to be a growing need for not tapping into traditional college student, but getting those career switchers, adult learners, micro boot campy certificate programs. Those are going to be exponentially growing in higher ed.
I think you can create the demand if you create value, right? Because there's 39 million students that could complete, and there's millions of students, that aren't going to college, that that were just 5 years ago, and some of that is about the increasing cost, and some of that is about political polarization. As the country moves more right and universities move more left, more and more people are wondering whether they'll be welcome, and whether there will be a free exchange of ideas. And I think that lean left, like whatever your political persuasion, it means you're reducing your potential demand. You're alienating potential students who want to get an education. So I think we create the demand. I think the pessimists is there's too much supply, but I think the optimist is you create the demand with a better product, with greater value.
Excellent. So I lied. I said that one part of our show is shot for shot. I mean, shout outs and plugs, but I do have a segment of my show called Shot for Shot. You get to ask me any random question. I get to ask you any random question. You want to go first? I go first.
You can go first.
All right. So you did not know you said UVA was your undergrad?
Yeah.
So shout out to UVA. My father-in-law, my late father-in-law, who was really close to me. He passed away, but he played actual varsity soccer at UVA. So shout out to the Who's. What was the club sport you played? And do the look. Back in my day, I was the ball. What position you played? What were you good at in that club sport?
I went from lacrosse to ultimate frisbee.
And what was your thing? What was it like? No one could. You could jump
My
high.
thing.
You was the thrower. What was your
So
thing that you would when you stung on people about your
I
career?
grew up playing goalie in soccer, so diving, like sacrificing my body, was kind of second nature, and that translated actually very well to ultimate because I was not afraid to get horizontal, at any time, and no matter how hard or soft the landing. So that proved to be a useful skill.
Shout out to Ash. That's awesome. I love that. All right, what's your question for me?
How did you meet your wife?
So
was it also a higher ed story?
No, it's funny. So the real origin story is I met my wife in the 10th grade. I had a crush on her friend, and we met at the library. Her friend was at the library. I magically had to show up at the same library in the 10th grade to her friend. Fast forward 2 years later, life went by, and I'm hanging out with another friend. And back in the day with AIM, my friend said, "Hey, I'm hanging out with Philip." And she said, "That weird guy that showed up at the library 2 years ago," she remembered. So I said, "Hey," so I started, this is going into college. I got her AIM, and we just started talking, almost like a virtual relationship that summer going into college, because we went to rival high schools in the area. But then, we started dating. She went to JMU off the break, great student. I got waitlisted because I was playing around too much in high school. So I went to another school, and we had a long distance relationship. But she was a very good motivator for me to get to JMU. I made Dean's List because of her. She was telling me, like, you need to go to the library and study. She hit me with if you want to be with me, you need to get your grades up kind of thing. So shout out to my wife. And so I guess we can say high school sweethearts, because we started dating going into our freshman year at respective schools. But we've been together since we were 18. Right now, yeah, it's going on 20 years. 2003, when I graduated high school, it's 20 years of being in a relationship and going on 10 years of marriage. So 10 and 10. So, I joke. My joke is that I got involved with my wife before she knew the world and can find anyone better than me. I got her while she was, before she got
first
influenced.
mover advantage. Yeah.
Yeah. And now I got 2 kids with her. So she really locked with me. I got her. But she definitely was a good, I think about that. She was definitely in a good space. I was a young man. I went from growing up. I grew up with her. I love that value grow. I think I did grow as a person, a better person, human being because of her. But also, she also helped me grow professionally because she was telling me to do stuff. Like, if you want, you want to get your grades up, you want to do this. She got her master's first. I'm like, dang, I got my master's. I chased her a lot. So she was definitely, still is very, very influential. So shout out to you, Maggie. This is your only shout out because I don't want to get your head big. I'm saying that. Okay, sideline story. One time my wife got mad at me and she said, if it wasn't for me, you'd be dead in a dumpster. And I was like, dang, like in a dumpster, like I got no enemies. Maybe I heard the ditch, dead in a ditch. So I told that story to my parents, and my parents like, yeah, I can see that. I was like, dang, they co-signed on it. My dad even
real talk right there.
Yeah, my dad even brought it up in our engagement dinner. He was like, thank you, Maggie, for saving my son from the dumpster. I'm like, dang. So we have a joke called shout out, save my life, save me from the dumpster. But I would not be half the man if I wasn't. So this is the end of the show. I know you gotta go. So shout outs and plugs. So the platform is yours. Shout outs and plugs. Show love to everyone you need to show love to.
Well, I'll go with my family. My wife Liz. I don't remember all our wedding vows, but I do remember maybe the most important part was a pledge to support and challenge each other, and we do that every day. And I really value that. And my daughter Nora is 8, and she loves to make things. And she actually coined the term maker family. So she refers to us as the maker family. So we're always working on projects where she's either like making a bracelet, making a house for stuffed animals, whatever it might be. And my son Theo, who's like so precise, and asks such great questions. He's 5, and he's making me such a better communicator because like he wants everything so precise that like if you can't say like be careful, you have to say like watch where to step, and it's just like I'm getting so much better as a parent, as a person, because of that. And plugs, I'm reading a great book called Emotion by Design, by Greg Hoffman, who used to be the CMO at Nike. And I've been lucky enough to get involved here in Minneapolis as a board member at MCAD, the Minneapolis College of Art and Design, and met Greg through that. And the book is just these awesome stories behind all these amazing campaigns at Nike and how to communicate with emotion to reach people. And it's inspiring.
Where can the listeners follow and where can the listeners connect with you?
If you go to ElliotFelix.com, you find information about the book and articles I've written, talks I've given, and all my social feeds. So ElliotFelix.com is the best place.
Well, thank you so much, Elliot. I know that your time is precious, so I want to say thank you so much for being a guest. Positive Philter listeners, please follow up with Elliot and all the things that he's working on. His website will be in the show notes. Additionally, as you know, every episode is dedicated to late memory of my father-in-law, Jeff Kirsch. So please consider donating to the Jeff Kirsch Anti-Hunger Fund. I put that in the show notes of every show, to show love and respect to a mentor and a friend of mine. Positive Philter listeners, has been a great show. Follow, like, subscribe. Please engage with the podcast in any way. And thank you so much. And we're out. Thank you for listening to Positive Philter, a podcast that focuses on family, friends, career, with a little self-help along the way. If you enjoyed this podcast, please share it with your family and friends, and like the Facebook page, Spreading Positivity of Movement. Thanks for listening.